Good morning, everyone. If you logged in a few minutes early, you've already heard me introduce myself. This is Katie Giardello, and I'm going to kick off our recap webinar that will go over what was discussed just a couple of days ago at our Phase 3 MiTransfer Pathways First Faculty Summit on May the 15th. During this recap webinar, we will ask that everyone remains muted. I have actually taken the liberty of muting all of our participants at the current moment. However, you do retain control to unmute yourself. And it sounds like people are hearing me okay, because I did have a little bit of interactive dialogue at the beginning. So unless that is not true, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, if you can't hear me, you don't know that. So you're also welcome to engage with us through a chat panel that you will see in the control panel area of the webinar screen. So feel free to, you'll see that I've already written a message to you all in the chat panel. We will be monitoring that as we go through the webinar. And our plan for the webinar is we've literally used the same slide deck that we used with the faculty and transfer liaisons that participated in the meeting. And we will give you the Cliff Notes version of that meeting. Instead of a full day in Lansing, you'll get about a 50-minute overview of what was discussed and clear instructions on what the next steps are if your institution plans to participate in any of the Phase 3 pathways. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off and let you know that the way that we started the meeting was with a few people welcoming folks and letting them know about their association's commitment to the project. So Dr. Pete Karsten, who is the campus president at Baker College of Auburn Hills, did us the honor of kicking off the day and representing the Michigan independent colleges and universities. And then we had the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Dan Hurley anyway, had the pleasure of welcoming everyone as well, representing the Michigan Association of State Universities. And then I took over to frame the day and explain to our Phase 3 participants, who are all brand new to this project for the most part, kind of how we arrived at this project. So I'm going to take you on that same journey with a little bit of information on the history and context of the work, and then some data that demonstrates the need to clear the pathway for community college transfer students nationally, but in Michigan particularly. Some of you will know that this project is funded by the Michigan legislature. We received a one-time appropriation grant for 3 years to complete this project. And in order to do so, we've been working with a group of representative leaders that we call the Transfer Steering Committee. And that committee has embraced the objective that you're seeing on the screen in front of you to make the overall transfer experience more efficient, easy to understand, and simple to navigate while optimizing credit transfer. So those are the objectives that underlie this project, and that's how we stay focused on what we're trying to do here. And this has risen to the top of priority list across the country, in part because new, more sophisticated data has emerged that shows us a few things about the transfer landscape. The slide that you're seeing before you is showing you how impactful community college credits are to students receiving bachelor's degrees. What you're seeing are the percentage of students who graduated with a bachelor's degree in 2015-16 who had previous enrollment at two-year public institutions. So for us at the Community College Association, this slide demonstrates how important community college credits are to increasing bachelor's degree completion across the country. You can see there's wide variability across the states in the percentage of students with those community college credits. It goes as high as 75% in Texas, and then it goes as low as in the 20s in some of the New England states. In Michigan, we're kind of in the middle of that range, with about 52% of our 2015-16 bachelor's degree earners having received credit from a two-year public institution. So we believe that this data, and this has actually steadily increased in the time that this report has been published. So we've seen this go up from 49% to 52% in just a few years. And to us, that indicates this is a rising trend and that transfer really is becoming the norm for post-secondary students across the country, and certainly in Michigan. Now, some bad news is that what we are seeing, and this has been true in the literature on transfer student success for decades, is that students are not transferring out in as high of rates as they indicate an aspiration for their bachelor's degree. So there's a disconnect when they say they want to get a bachelor's and then they actually get out and transfer. And then it gets even worse when you look at their actual completion rates, both for an associate and a bachelor's degree. So on the left side, you're seeing the national average for transfer out, right around 31.5%. In Michigan, that's higher. So we have more students transferring out than is typical across the country. Unfortunately, though, we have far less students in that middle column transferring with an award, which in this case we're calling that is an associate degree, because that's the award that the student would receive from the community college. And you can see that that is really low, especially compared to the national average. And then again, it gets worse as we look to the far right and see the completion rate for those students in their bachelor's programs. So across the country, it's a little bit higher at 42.2%, but in Michigan, only 36.6% of our community college transfer students ultimately get that bachelor's degree. And so that means there is a huge proportion of students who have neither degree. They're not receiving the associate nor the bachelor's degree upon transferring. And in many cases, these students have accumulated quite a bit of student debt, and they have no credential to show for that. So for a lot of people in higher education, that is a significant problem. And for those of us interested in social justice and who know the cohort that community colleges typically serve, we know that this is even worse for our underserved students. So that is kind of why this data has been very compelling to states across the country, and why more than 30 states have taken on this work to smooth these transfer pathways by creating what we are calling associate to bachelor's degree transfer pathways. This slide is a little difficult to digest, but it's one of my favorites as a PhD student, because I appreciate a different way to demonstrate and describe data other than just typical charts. So this is a Sankey graph. And it's actually showing, the lines are representing student flow. So on the left side, you see the 28 community colleges in Michigan. And then on the right side, you see a mixture of public and private and independent colleges and universities that receive transfer students. So on the left, it's the community college that is sending the transfer student. And on the right, it's the university that's receiving them. And this is based on data that was procured for a project that the Michigan Center for Student Success collaborated with a researcher out of the University of Utah to produce with a generous grant from MCAN, the Michigan College Access Network, that really helped to sort of frame and support this project as it began. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this is that a lot of folks in Michigan, when we first started talking about building these statewide pathways, felt like their pathways were very localized, and that, they had their local regional partners between community colleges and universities, and maybe we didn't need to create these statewide pathways. Well, what this chart shows me is that even though there are definitely some clear relationships in the thicker lines between certain, usually geographically co-located institutions, students are actually going all over the state. They're coming from all of the community colleges and going to nearly all of the universities in the state. And to us, that demonstrated a distinct need to try to help students make sense of these transfer pathways, so that if they're making decisions about transfer, they have the opportunity to attend whichever university may make the most sense for them for their major area or for where they're living. I'm seeing a question about the statistics. So I'm going to go back real quick, and I might draw on my colleague to help me with this question. So Ashley has asked, does the 52% statistic include students who may have completed one class over the summer? And does that consider a particular percentage of courses? I believe it's any credit.
I'd have to look, and that's a really good question. I'd have to look and see. This comes from the National Student Clearinghouse Signature Report number 13, and they may exclude summer only, but they may not. I can look that up while Katie's still talking.
Perfect, thank you, Erica. So my colleague, Dr. Erica Oriens, is in the room with me, and she'll look that up. They do, I believe, describe the methodology in that report, and it is on the National Student Clearinghouse website if anyone's interested. And we don't have it linked here, but if you can't find it, we can certainly send you the link as well. Thanks for the question, Ashley. Okay, so we were on the Sankey graph, and we're going to move forward and just help you understand that this data all went into the decision for the associations to pursue this grant funding with support from, as I said, this transfer steering committee, which has been overseeing this work and a number of strategies related to increasing transfer student success since the fall of 2016. And this includes representatives in leadership positions from community colleges, public universities, independent colleges and universities, as well as strong partnership from the MACRO organization, which some of you may be familiar with and some of you may not be, but it is the Michigan Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers. And in the absence of a state agency or coordinating board or body for higher education in Michigan, MACRO has actually kind of taken up the charge on transfer since their transfer agreement for general education transfer came out in 1972. That was updated, as some of you know, to the Michigan Transfer Agreement in 2014, and that really laid the foundation for the work that's being done now to take that a little further and build upon the general education package and actually create these pre-major pathways, which is what this project is seeking to do. The Transfer Steering Committee helps us guide the strategies that we are using, the project staff use to kind of make this work across the state, and they have been responsible for selecting all of the pathways for the project. And we're going to talk about those pathways next. Just a minute, actually. We're going to talk about the strategies first and then the pathways. So you can see here there are 6 strategies that the Transfer Steering Committee embraced. The first, and the one that we are really excited about because it will launch this Friday, is to replace the Michigan Transfer Network. The Michigan Transfer Network has been in operation for over 10 years, and it provides a statewide repository for transfer credit equivalencies across the state. And it has been my pleasure to be working on this project for the last few years with a team of institutional leaders and other project consultants to enhance and upgrade the Michigan Transfer Network, which will go live tomorrow. And it looks amazing. We're really excited about it. The functionality of the site has been increased, and it will be very helpful to both students and we believe faculty and advisors. And Erica has sent the link out to the report that we were discussing earlier if anyone wants to take a look at it. So it's in the chat box. Okay, so the other strategies that have been embraced or endorsed by the Transfer Steering Committee is number 2, which is what we are talking about and what we call MiTransfer pathways. The mouthful description of what a MiTransfer pathway is a multi-institutional associate to bachelor's degree transfer pathway. We are very clear that we would like to create a pathway that helps a student complete both the associate degree and the bachelor's degree. And of course, we want to try to minimize credit waste when those students do transfer. There are 4 other strategies that have been related to this project. One of them, which you'll hear more about in a little while, is aligning mathematics requirements within programs of study. We know mathematics is a gateway course and can be a reason that many students withdraw from higher education. And clearing that pathway and making sure they're taking the right course at the right level can be very important to keeping students on track to graduate. I had the pleasure of working on, and I know others are still continuing to work toward, articulating academic credit awards for military training and experience. Michigan is actually a leader, recognized as a leader in this area on a project that we've been working on with the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, and it's been wonderful to see that work unfold. We've also been using a number of communication platforms to spotlight best practices across the state and across the country that are being embraced to improve transfer student success. And we've had the good fortune to work with the National Student Clearinghouse, the Community College Research Center, and a number of others interested in transfer student success as well, in highlighting those best practices. And then finally, as you saw, we are looking to produce and utilize better data on transfer student outcomes. Transfer students are a little tricky to track, and that can make it difficult to evaluate how their success rates are and are not going.
Just for me.
Okay, perfect. We're gonna now talk about how we picked the pathways. So we have done 3 phases of this work so far. We are hopefully nearing the end of phase 1, about in the middle of phase 2, and at the beginning of phase 3. The Transfer Steering Committee selected the pathways for this articulation through IPEDS reports that tracked the highest number of bachelor's earners in these fields, as well as job outlooks. And in a moment, I'll show you some of the sources that they used to develop this list. The phase 1 pathways were, if you care for the term, the low-hanging fruit. Those are among the most popular majors in Michigan, and we have also heard from our institutional partners among the most popular transfer majors in Michigan. In phase 2, the group wanted to add a little bit of diversity and selected the next 4 set of pathways. And then in phase 3, I believe this is an exciting opportunity because phase 3, the Transfer Steering Committee selected some pathways that do not already have a whole lot of transfer agreements. However, that doesn't mean they don't have transfer activity. These programs do receive transfer students and transfer credit, and it has, from my perspective, from the meeting just a short time ago, it has been wonderful to pull the faculty together and begin talking about articulated pathways in these areas. So phase 3 is what we're discussing today, and those pathways are in art, English, exercise science or kinesiology, and public health. And as I promised, these are some of the resources that the Transfer Steering Committee used during their meeting. It was a consensus-based process wherein everyone got to vote, and the highest vote earners were selected for those pathways, again, based on IPEDS data, information that came from the Community College Research Center and the National Student Clearinghouse, as well as Michigan's Hot Job Outlook. We have done some extensive study of other states. I mentioned earlier in the webinar that there are more than 30 states who are undertaking this associate degree transfer work, and we drew heavily from some of their pioneering work in this area, particularly the states listed. We've had phone calls with the project staff that oversaw this work, and we certainly utilized the websites that have been developed alongside this work as we have put forward the new MTN that will go live tomorrow. After we provided this framing for everyone, my colleague Kevin Chandler from Macomb Community College led the group in kind of an icebreaker discussion. So we put up the slide in front of you to ask people to have some dialogue at their tables. And the faculty were seated together by discipline, so it was a nice way for people to begin to meet one another and kind of really reflect on both their institutional priorities around transfer, but also in their program area, to sort of lay out what kind of barriers and opportunities may have existed in their program areas. So folks talked for about 20, 25 minutes, and then we came back together and we gave them sort of their marching orders. And this is where they had the opportunity to hear from Dr. Oriens on how we would do this work. So I'm going to invite her to take over, and I guess I can stop and check for questions. It doesn't look like we have anything currently in the chat. We do not. So we're going to go ahead and keep on rolling, and she will take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Katie. So this is really the meat of what we asked the faculty to do for the rest of the day. Our goal at the meeting was to identify the required, recommended, optional, and appropriate courses that meet associate and bachelor's degree program requirements in the first and second year. So that's just a really long way of saying, what should students take if they are going to enroll at a community college? What should they take in the first and second year? We use this graphic on the right to sort of visually represent an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree, and roughly split that out to include the MTA, major-specific courses, and then electives on top of that. And those can be program-specific electives or general electives, depending on the program. This is really based on the foundation of the MTA that institutions signed in 2014, because we get about halfway to the associate degree when we build this on the foundation of the MTA. And of course, we know that students who are pursuing these programs of study need to take major specific courses in the first and second year. It used to be students could kind of explore the curriculum, take their gen ed, take some electives in the first and second year, and then start their program in their junior year. And as most of you know who work at an institution of higher education, the curriculum typically for many programs has fewer electives and is spread out over all 4 years of the curriculum. We'll talk a little bit about the assumptions that we made collectively. So we use this collection of terms: required, recommended, optional, and appropriate courses. And this is really just sort of a general way of saying, what should students take to meet degree requirements in the first and second year of the program? We continue to say first and second year of the program, but we get it that not all students will complete a degree in 4 years. We mean that they're completing it in the first 60 hours, they're completing it in the first half of the program, the sort of general idea that this is happening at the lower division level as opposed to the upper division level. So just know that we're talking about all of those things, and we know that not every student completes a degree in 4 years. We also assume that the student has selected a major. So we're not recommending courses that students should take if they think they might want to be a public health major. We are assuming that the student has selected a major and they know that they want to be a public health major. We also recognize that some students will enroll part-time and need to enroll for longer to complete the associate's degrees and the related courses. So we are assuming that we acknowledge that many students will enroll part-time, but we still need to know what courses they should take early on in the program. And we will focus on students who intend to earn an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree. So we have now, this is the third group of faculty that we've done this with, and we have a kind of a fun process, I guess you could say. After we've had hundreds of faculty do this, I feel confident that I could say that it's kind of fun. That we walk through to really get to that goal of what is required or recommended in the first and second year. I'm going to walk through what those steps are. So the first thing that we ask the faculty to do is review their own program. So what do you require in your associate degree and your bachelor's degree? What are you asking students to do? And this seems like it would be an easy task, but we often don't think about the curriculum in terms of this is what you do in the first 2 years and this is what you do in the second 2 years. But of course, when we're talking about transfer students, we do need to think about it in that way. So the first step is to ask the faculty to think about their own program. And then what we do is we ask them to let us know what courses they think that students should take in the first and second year. And you'll see in the next slide that we have these very large Post-it notes that we put up on the wall. And this is just an example here of, we already know that in programs like mechanical engineering, students need to take Calculus 1, for example. But there may have been courses that we missed. And so we ask institutions on these blank sheets to tell us. They may say, well, you know, you really need to put Calc 2 and Calc 3 up there too, because our students take that in the first and second year, or we recommend students take that. So we're asking them to add, what are these courses? Tell us what these courses are. Then this is where the fun part comes in. So we ask universities to tell us if particular courses are required, recommended, optional, or appropriate in the first and second year. And the way that we do that is, you see an image here. So for General Chemistry 1, on the top half of the page, we've asked the universities to say yes or no if this course is required or recommended, optional, or appropriate in the first and second year. And the little sticky notes that you see on here are the names of institutions. So each faculty member gets a sheet of labels with the name of their institution on it, and they tell us if this course, yes, is required, or no, is not. And then at the bottom of the sheet, the community college tells us if they offer that course to students. And so you see here the example with general chemistry. And in this case, and I'm assuming this is the biology program, all of the biology programs that were represented at our meeting require that students take this in the first and second year. They recommend that students take it. At the community college, all the community colleges offer general chemistry. So what we see here are some consistency across the state in what is required. The next thing that we ask faculty to do once they go through that process of identifying the courses by saying yes or no, if they're required and if they're offered, what we ask them to do is another activity where they're clustering those courses together into courses that are commonly required in the first and second year, and courses that, well, in some cases are definitely not required in the first and second year, or really are just not universally required. So it seems like, for example, in this case here, in the case of biology, we see anatomy and physiology on the as one of our sheets. About half of the universities recommended anatomy and physiology, and half don't, or don't even require it. So it's not terribly common, but you see over here on the left-hand side, we have several courses that are commonly required and recommended. So then we ask them to discuss. So let's talk about this. Let's generate some conversation about this. Let's generate what we think would be some issues associated with this. And this is just a photo from one of our events where the faculty were discussing some of the issues they had. And you can see over here on the walls where these big sticky notes were. I'm sure you just feel like you were just right there. And then what we do is we ask them to document this. So we say, we say what program information, what are the MTA courses that you recommend for students, And those common courses are what we started to refer to as the MiTransfer pathways courses. And so these are the commonly agreed upon courses that it looks like a student could start at a community college, take the MTA in this set of pathways courses, and then they would have several options, several transfer destinations. It also allows them to explore this program a little bit more, have a better understanding of what they need to take and what would be required in this program. And then in the bottom section here is where we're asking university and community colleges to indicate any remaining degree requirements. So they may not have been common courses across the state, which obviously are up here in these MiTransfer pathways, but nevertheless, the university recommends that the student takes those courses, or the community college requires that the students take those courses before they get an associate degree. So we ask folks to complete this worksheet to document what they've done. And then we also have another big sticky note that we call the parking lot. And the parking lot is really about those sticky issues that we can't address in 2 hours and 2.5 hours. But they're issues and concerns that need to be addressed if students, if the expectation is that students will be able to earn their associate degree and then transfer to a university. And we will have a follow-up meeting in October to address those parking lot issues. The other exciting thing that we ask faculty to do is aligned with our work in strengthening math pathways in Michigan. So as many of you know, math can be a significant barrier to students completing their degree. And so we want to make sure that we do address some of those mathematics issues. So I just want to go over really quickly what some of our mathematics faculty have been doing. So first of all, what is a math pathway? A math pathway is a math course or sequence of courses that students can take to meet the requirements of their program of study. For those of you who have been involved in the MTA, you know that we established 3 mathematics pathways, including quantitative reasoning, statistics, and preparation for calculus. So as opposed to defaulting every student into college algebra and then they select another mathematics course, that we do a better job of offering these multiple mathematics pathways. And in 2015, MCCA and MASU partnered with the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin to launch the Right Math at the Right Time Task Force to strengthen the implementation of math pathways. So Michigan's engagement in this, we were involved with the Dana Center. There were 6 other states that have done this in the work that we've done, and then many other states that have done this in other ways as well, where they're strengthening these mathematics pathways. So this is really a national movement in mathematics to provide these different mathematics pathways for students. The Right Math at the Right Time Steering Committee made several recommendations in 2016 where they establish a process to align learning outcomes, so to ensure that those courses are transferable, that faculty would adopt those learning outcomes and those mathematics pathways within a program of study. And then our third strategy very much focused around improving the pathways through developmental education. If students needed Dev Ed courses, that we strengthen that pathway as well. But really we were focusing on strategy number 2 in our transfer work. You can find information about strategy number 1 on our website, and we have links to this at the end of our presentation, so you can find information about these various different pathways if you're not familiar with it. And then just showing you quickly what some of the learning outcomes are, or the overall learning outcomes are for the various different mathematics pathways. And this was helping the faculty sort of have an understanding of what these different pathways mean. But our real goal today was to adopt a math pathway or select the appropriate MTA math pathway for each of our programs of study. So what is the most appropriate math pathway for these programs that we've selected? Generally, we find that business and STEM select something on the preparation for calculus. Social sciences selects statistics, and liberal arts typically selects quantitative reasoning, although there can be differences in there as well. But this is generally nationally how things work out in these areas. And then just drilling down a little bit more on that strategy number 3 of supporting underprepared students, and we wanted to just speak to you specifically about exactly what that means. And what it really means is adopting better placement practices, so determining if a student has a need for developmental education, that we include or use multiple measures, including their high school GPA, high school grades, and accurate assessments. So the evidence suggests that giving students a high-stakes placement test immediately before they enroll in college, that is the only thing that determines their mathematics placement, is probably not the most accurate placement into DevEd. That they're using multiple measures, including their high school GPA, high school grades, and in combination with those accurate assessments is a better way to place students in DevEd, and it's more accurate. We also are helping colleges do a better job of adopting co-requisite strategies. And what that means is that instead of placing students in a long sequence of developmental courses, so they may take pre-algebra and then algebra algebra 2 before they take the college level course, that actually what we're doing, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, but we do a co-requisite remediation, which is the student enrolls in the college level course. At the same time, they're enrolling in credit that provides them with support for that college level course. So it's counterintuitive because if you're not strong in math, it seems odd that you would register for 6 credit hours of math instead of 3. But if I had time to show you the data, I can show you that it works, that when you give students the support they need while they are enrolled in the college level course, that they are more successful than the students who enroll in this long sequence of developmental courses. As I said, today's goal is to really identify that Math Pathways course. After we shared this overview of the day, we broke for lunch and we reset the room, which you don't need to worry about, but we were all in the same room, and then the walls came down and then the walls went back up after the faculty met, and then we shared outcomes of the breakout sessions and talked about our next steps. The faculty in these 4 program areas, and then the transfer liaisons went into their breakout rooms and went through the process that I described to you a little bit earlier. And I want to share with you what they came up with. As I mentioned, we asked them to identify what these common courses were, or what the MiTransfer Pathways courses were, and also recommend a mathematics pathway. The art faculty got together and they were really looking at a studio art pathway. And across the art programs across the state, it appears that both community colleges and universities offer, and universities require, Art History 1, Art History 2, Drawing 1, 3D design, and digital design. They also identified 2D design as a tentative course that all students should take. And the reason that was tentative was because the faculty wanted to review the syllabus for that course to have a better understanding of how 2D design, what is included in 2D design. They also want to make sure that students are getting access to studio art in the first and second year. And tentatively that they are taking a non-Western art course and a contemporary or modern art course. But once again, they want to see how, what the syllabus looks like and do some more research on the extent to which those courses are required, should be taken in the first and second year. Because as you can see, art came up with a pretty long list of courses. And then the faculty, any math course would be acceptable, any MTA math course would be acceptable for art majors, but they really recommended that students should pursue the quantitative reasoning pathway as a good applied mathematics course for students pursuing art. The English faculty identified Intro to Literary Studies, Creative Writing, 1 literature survey, and 1 diversity literature course as courses that students should take in the first and second year. This was a little bit unusual for us because the English faculty identified that there are a variety of different options in a literature survey. It could be American Lit 1 and 2, just American Lit, Brit Lit 1 and 2, or just British literature. And then there are several different options for the diversity literature course. This will be a really interesting pathway because there are so many different options in this area. So the English faculty, we think we'll have to engage a lot of discussion about how they can, how flexible they can be as for transfer students that transfer into English programs across the state. They indicated that any MTA math is acceptable, including quantitative reasoning, and they also recommend that students take Comp 2 for the MTA. So as many of you know, the MTA allows for flexibility for students to take Comp 1 and a communications course. But for the English program, obviously, they want students to take Comp 1 and Comp 2. Exercise science was another pathway, and faculty recommended that students take a 2-semester sequence in anatomy and physiology with a lab, that they take human nutrition, first aid and CPR, a survey or intro to exercise science course, intro to psychology, and a general chemistry course with a lab. And the exercise science programs also require that students take statistics and calculus. So both of those courses should be completed in the first and second year. In public health, the public health faculty identified community health, nutrition, personal health and wellness, introduction to psychology, principles or intro to public health, and possibly an environmental health that could be completed in the first and second year. And they recommended statistics in the mathematics pathway course. It was public health was an interesting group because, as many of you probably suspected, this is an emerging undergraduate program across the nation and in the state of Michigan. So public health was very excited that we'll be able to share this opportunity to pursue a public health program with so many community college students. And then we talked about next steps. So we were pleased that so many faculty joined us and transfer liaisons joined us at our meeting, but there's also a lot of work to be done after the meeting. As I showed you before, we asked those programs to complete a program worksheet, and we have a template available for the universities and the community colleges. And all of this information will be available online on our MiTransfer.net website. We asked them to complete the degree program information, including their institution, degree or program, and the credits required. We asked them to let us know what are the recommended MTA courses, because we know that, as you saw when you looked through those lists of courses, some of those required courses overlap with the MTA distribution areas. So we asked institutions to identify those MTA courses. This is a blank area of the MiTransfer pathways, but we will pre-populate this worksheet with the tentative and tentative MiTransfer pathways course, all the MiTransfer pathways courses. Then they can indicate to us what those subject and course numbers are, so that we can see what courses are in there. And then, as I mentioned before, this is really a really important part of the worksheet where universities and community colleges can indicate those remaining degree requirements. So this is where the community colleges can indicate if they require any additional courses that are not MTA or MiTransfer pathways. So several community colleges offer or require a computer literacy course or a physical education course, which would need to be included in here. And then the universities can indicate courses that didn't make it into the common list of courses or the MiTransfer pathways courses, but certainly would be important for students to complete, and students would be able to complete those at the community college. We also want to make sure that all of the courses are equivalent. So for those of you who use the Michigan Transfer Network, you know that you can look up any one of these courses and see if it's equivalent between institutions. And so we made available to colleges a tracking tool to identify equivalencies that they still need to complete. The new Michigan Transfer Network will go live on May 31st, and colleges can look up their course equivalencies to determine if they have equivalencies available in the MTN. We also are asking participating institutions to upload syllabi for their courses because, of course, to be able to ensure that courses are transferable or to establish an equivalency, institutions typically need to review the syllabus. So we have created a Canvas website or Canvas site where people can exchange syllabi. And then we're asking them to talk with their peers that attended the meetings or other people at the institutions to develop new equivalencies as needed. And we have contact information out there for folks to do that. On June 5th, we will be sending a follow-up email summarizing these next steps to all of the participating institutions. As you can imagine, by about 3:30 on the day of the event, everybody is exhausted. And I'm not sure how much information we're retaining after a full day of engagement. And so we will be sending a follow-up email on June 5th. We are asking, we need to know, as the project staff, we need to know for those MiTransfer Pathways courses, what is your course? So what is the department and course number for that course? So we will be asking the institutions to tell us that information in a survey that they'll complete before July 1st. By September 27th, institutions will upload those draft worksheets to Canvas. And we will have our first deadline for institutions to add a course equivalencies in the MTN. These faculty will come back together to meet on October 11th, again at Lansing Community College West, and we hope to sign articulation agreements in the spring of 2020 so that students can begin using these articulation agreements right away. Everyone who attended the meeting is eligible for a travel stipend, which was for the amount of $200 per meeting. It is paid after the second meeting in the fall of 2019, and we can make that payable to the individual or institution depending on who paid for the travel. And as I mentioned, we have project materials available on our website at www.mitransfer.net /phase 3. And so if you click in here to phase 3 meeting 1, you can find all of the materials that we talked about today with additional information available. And we also have our contact information here if folks have questions. I encourage you, if you're a state university, that you reach out to Will Emerson. If you're a community college, you reach out to me. And if you're an independent college or university, you can reach out to Shannon Price as well. We are happy to answer your questions about the webinar, about the phase 3 pathways, and answer any questions that you have now if you want to add them to the chat or unmute yourself.
And this is Katie again. I just wanted to add 2 things. One, I forgot to tell you in the beginning that we are recording this webinar. So if you do unmute yourself, just know you'll be recorded. And we're doing that so that we can link to this recording on our project website. And you may wish to advance that link on to some of your colleagues that you think may benefit from hearing this information. And so you'll be able to find that on that project website that Erica showed just a few minutes ago. And then finally, if you wish to receive the follow-up email that's going to go out next week, please communicate with me, Katie Giardello, and I will add you to that list so that you receive the follow-up email next week along with the others who participated in the meeting so that you have the next steps in a very clearly delineated list, which is how we expect to send it next week. Looks like we do have a question.
Ashley asked if the parking lot issues will be circulated in the follow-up email.
So yes, kind of. The way that we have addressed this in the past is we've used the Canvas forum for the project to create digital discussion boards for the faculty in phase 3, or in each phase anyway. So in phase 3, we will develop each pathway has its own module, and there will be a discussion board within the module for each pathway for the parking lot issues. And essentially, we will list them out, and then we will invite faculty to discuss those in that discussion board in a digital capacity. And the facilitators, each group had a strong lead who helped to facilitate the conversation. And we will be debriefing with those facilitators and identifying additional areas of research that the project staff can do in order to help the faculty come back to those parking lot discussions at the meeting in the fall and make some decisions about things that may have needed more inquiry, as I already referenced. And whether or not those things actually do, sometimes issues are identified that are important to the discipline, but not necessarily critical to developing an associate to bachelor's degree transfer pathway. So that's a lot of the work that we do with the facilitators, is sort of parsing out those issues and deciding which ones really need to be further addressed by the faculty. Any other questions anyone has? You will get instructions in that follow-up email on how to engage with our Canvas site. If your campus uses Canvas for learning management, you have to use a different link in order to get in, but otherwise individuals will self-enroll in our Canvas forum, so you simply have to use the link and have the code, which will be sent in the follow-up email next week. Any final questions before we go ahead and say goodbye this morning? Another question, who is the email sent to? So we will be sending the follow-up email to everyone that participated in the meeting. So each faculty member that was representing their discipline and their institution for the Phase 3 pathways will receive a specific message about their discipline's proceedings on this event. The transfer liaisons will be copied on each one of those messages, and then the transfer liaisons will also receive a separate email that is just for them. So that's why I was offering, if any of you who didn't attend the meeting would like to receive that message for your discipline area, you should send an email to me, and you can see my email address on the screen, kgiardello@mcca.org, and I'll make sure that you get on the list. You do need to let me know which discipline area or transfer liaison, if that's the role that you serve at your campus. Other questions? Well, I will thank you all for joining us and for your continued engagement. I know some of you were on the webinar yesterday as well, where we recapped the Phase 2 meeting that happened the day prior to the Phase 3 meeting. So thanks for hanging in there with us and enduring a little bit of duplicate information, but getting to hear what happened for Phase 3. And please do feel free to be in touch with us if we can answer any questions or provide more detail. I expect that this webinar recording and the slides that we used today will be updated before the end of the week on the project website in case you want to refer back to it, or you want to send it on to any of your colleagues. I hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.